evening, everyone. If we can all please take our seats so we can start the forum tonight, we greatly appreciate it.
Director of the ACLU of Georgia. On behalf of all the sponsors, the League of Women Voters, Atlanta, Fulton County, the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, Delta Sigma Theta Atlanta Alumni Chapter, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Atlanta Chapter, and the New Leaders Council, and of course our wonderful host, The Gathering Spot, and the ACLU of Georgia, I'd like to welcome all of you to this conversation about the future of our great city. Thank you to the candidates, Mr. Dickens and Ms. Moore, for your long history of public service to our community, and to our moderator, Condace Pressley. Especially at this time, we cannot take our democracy for granted, that we, the people, are able to choose our leaders. Atlanta is a city that does great things. I'm wearing my mother's Atlanta Olympic Organizing Committee scarf. We are a city that others look to as an example of multiracial democracy, and our aspiration to provide quality of life for all of our residents, from Peachtree Hills to Peoplestown. Again, thanks to all of you for your participation in this forum. And now the President of the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County Chapter, Nicola Hines, with our instructions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Once again, I'm Nicola Hines. I'm the President for the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County, and I also want to say thank you for attending tonight. We're very proud to be the first candidate forum for the runoff elections. So I'm going to reiterate the rules so that everyone is clear. One thing for sure is that this is not a debate, it is a forum. So we always want to make sure that's clear. Candidates have been invited to appear here. Does not constitute that we endorse the candidates that are on stage. As a 501c, we are not allowed to endorse any candidate or political party. The main criteria for the forum participation is that the candidates must have qualified during the qualifying period and established by state law. And for the runoff, for any candidate that has not made above 50% is participating tonight. No use of League of Women Voters and or sponsoring partners' logo or destination is allowed without prior written consent of League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County. Candidate speaking order will be determined by the moderator in an unbiased manner. Audio and visual recording of the forum may be streamed on the League of Women Voters Atlanta Fulton County or sponsoring websites and or social media platforms. Any other use of the material requires express written approval from the League of Women Voters and the sponsoring organizations. No campaign banners, background signs, or other campaign paraphernalia will be allowed during the forum. Responses will be limited and time will be strictly observed by our timekeeper who's sitting in the front, Ms. Nasinga Burton. Raise your hand so that the candidates know who you are. She has both a sign and a horn, so hopefully we don't have to use the horn. So if you go past that time, she's going to blow the horn. But she does have signs to let you know. You will have 1 minute for your opening statement, 1 minute for your closing statement, and this evening we have 2-minute questions, 1-minute questions, and 30-second questions. Based on the time, we will also take questions that were pre-selected from our audience. From our moderator, we'll ask those questions if time permits. The moderator is also responsible for enforcing time limits, and the moderator also will have the authority to interrupt the proceedings to enforce the ground rules and format agreed by the candidates. The moderator may restate the question for you, and the moderator may interrupt the candidates if he or she believes the candidates are straying from the subject. The candidates will not interrupt each other, because once again, it's not a debate, it is a candidate forum. And candidates will limit their responses to the questions asked and refrain from personal comparisons to other candidates. Personal attacks by one candidate on another candidate, elected official, or administration is not tolerated by the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County. Candidates will have no opportunity to rebuttal following the closing statements. Those are the rules. Candidates, you do understand the rules this evening, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, for our fabulous moderator. brief. I got you. I kind of cut it down already. But you're so fabulous, Ms. Pressley. You are fabulous. So, to our fabulous moderator, she wants me to cut her bio brief, but she's got so much great stuff in her bio. Condace Pressley is an award-winning journalist. She's an Emmy Award-winning, two-time Hall of Fame member inducted in 2019 into the Georgia Association of Broadcasters and in 2016 into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame. As Director of Community Affairs for WSB-TV, Condace drives the Family to Family project and leads the station's community efforts across its broadcast platforms, including WSTV and the company's 4 radio stations. She's executive producer of People to People on WSB-TV and interviews community leaders weekly during the program, one-on-one segment. Condace began her career in radio first in Athens while studying journalism, political science at the University of Georgia, and later in Atlanta at WGST, the Georgia News Network, WSB, KISS 104.1, and B98.5. For more than 30 years, she has hosted the Sunday morning program affairs program, Perspectives, where she interviews hundreds of community and thought leaders. This University Georgia graduated with the College of Journalism and Mass Communications, and she was honored with the John H. Drewley Outstanding Young Alumni Award in 1992, and in 2015, the Grady College named Pressley to its centennial class of the Journalism Fellows, the college's highest honor. She has been profiled by the History Makers, the world's largest African-American oral video history, achieved for her significant contributions to media. Condace is a former president of both the National Association of Black Journalism, Atlanta Association of Black Journalists, and she was the chapter's 2012 Pioneer Black Journalist. She's a graduate of the Leadership of Atlanta. Welcome, everyone, Condace Pressley.
So good evening, everyone. We're happy to have you with us this evening as the candidates are here. Welcome to both of you, Councilmember Dickens, Council President Moore. You've heard the rules. You each have a 1-minute opportunity to deliver an opening statement. We will do that, let's say, in alphabetical order. So Councilmember Dickens, you will go first.
All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for all that you do and to all these organizations that have shared in the responsibility of hosting this event tonight. It's good to see all of you. My name is Andre Dickens, and I'm a native of Southwest Atlanta, a neighborhood called Adamsville, born to a single mother, Sylvia Dickens, where I became the first in my family to go to college when I went to Georgia Tech to get a chemical engineering degree. I'm an engineer, so I like to solve problems, and I led many teams and did very difficult projects as an engineer. And then I became a business owner. I owned a chain of furniture stores across this city where I grew that business to a multi-million-dollar business. I'm the father of Bailey Dickens. I'm a deacon of a church, a Black Baptist church. I'm also a technology leader at Tech Bridge, the Chief Development Officer, and I'm an 8-year veteran of the Atlanta City Council. I would love to be the mayor of the city of Atlanta. At a time like this, I have the head, the heart, and the hands to lead this city at this time. Thank you.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you to the League of Women's Voters. My name is Felicia Moore, President of the Atlanta City Council and candidate for mayor. I am a proud HBCU graduate of Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, with a degree in communications. I also hold a Master's of Science in Administration from Central Michigan University with a concentration in public administration. I come to running for mayor as having served as a president of my neighborhood association first, then chair of my neighborhood planning unit, delegate to Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, then the great fortune to work as an aide to a council member at City Hall, and then running for council and serving for 20 years, representing District 9, the most diverse district in the city that actually goes from Bankhead to Buckhead. So I've been able to build coalitions, work with people across the city, and I'm ready to address the needs that we have in our city from safety, services, and transparency.
Candidates, thank you very much. As stated in the guidelines, we have some questions where you get 2 minutes to answer, and that's where we will begin. We will start with Council President Moore for this one. Mistrust and skepticism has plagued city government for quite some time. If elected, how will you build morale in the city so that leadership is trusted? And the second part of that question is this: what specific policies, one or two, will you enact to improve transparency within city government?
Well, thank you, because transparency is one of the things that I've been advocating so hard for at City Hall. It's time now to get these clouds of corruption that's over City Hall gone and let the sun shine in. So there are many ways that I believe that we can build public trust, and that's first of all being trustworthy public servants, doing what we say we're going to do, and making sure people know what we're doing and what we're up to. I think that will start to build the trust. I have served with integrity on City Council, and so people know that I'm an ethical, transparent, and accountable official. So what you get from me, whether you like what I say or not, or share that position, you know that is what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to do that and bring that as mayor of the city. Several things that I would like to do on transparency. We do have a platform, thanks to my pushing and urging, where you can see how your money is being spent on City Hall. But I believe there are a lot of other ways that we can use that platform to be transparent. One is when we have, I'll go to officer-involved incidents in our community, shootings, et cetera. You know, that platform needs to be used where people can go to and see exactly what the process is, so that no one is wondering, why can't I get the body cam? I'm committing that we're gonna get body cams up on this website in 72 hours or less. You're gonna also be able to hear and know about the officer who was involved in it. Things that you haven't been able to see before, the programs and activities that you can really track what's going on. If people can see, touch, and feel what we're doing at City Hall, then they can feel that they're being trusted, whether you like it or not, but being able to know and be able to get that information. And that's one of many ways that I think transparency can be enhanced at City Hall.
Thank you very much. Do you need for me to repeat the question, Councilmember Dickens?
Yes, please.
All right. We're talking about mistrust and skepticism in city government. How are you going to build morale so that the citizens trust the government trusts each other, and what specific policies will you enact to improve city government transparency?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, money is a currency, but so is trust. Trust is really the primary currency that you have between the citizens and the government, and we have to earn it every single day as your elected officials. And as mayor, that's the biggest task that you have, is to make sure that the citizens are able to look you in the eye and trust that what you say you're gonna do is exactly what you do. And so transparency in our finances and transparency in our service delivery, and utilizing technology to help with both of them to make sure that the public can be able to see what we do. When it comes to trust with our service delivery, I plan to have a dashboard that you'll be able to see what the service level agreement is, meaning the service level agreement that we're gonna fill a pothole in 5 days or 6 days. That's the agreement. You'll see the benchmark. And then we'll see if we met that each and every day. There'll be a dashboard where you see monthly how many potholes were filled and were they filled on time. That is what you would expect from a professionally world-class run organization. We'll utilize data to be able to communicate with you. And that's the same thing we will do with our finances. Our open checkbook program needs to be more open. It needs to be real time where you can see it each and every day, our expenses. This is about transparency, which is why I was the candidate that actually published my taxes. I think that we're talking about transparency, so I actually published my taxes and I challenged every other candidate to do the same. And some said they would and nobody has. And so transparency actually starts with the leadership. So when we talk about transparency with our finances, we talk about transparency with our service level agreement, finally we must talk about transparency with the leadership of the mayor, his or herself. And so with me, you'll be able to see my tax returns each and every year, so you'll know what I'm up to or what I'm not up to, because I owe it to you to be clear with who I am.
Thank you very much. I feel the next question is this. The city has heard a great deal this campaign about affordable housing. In your own words, Councilmember Dickens, What do you define as affordable housing? And if elected, how will you prevent landlords from raising rent prices every year, considering the law allows that to happen at the will of the property owner?
But it's 2 minutes or 1 minute?
This is a 2-minute question.
Okay. Yeah, since 2010, the cost of housing has gone up by 50% in the city of Atlanta. But people's incomes, the working folks' income, has only gone up by 10%. So at a certain point, a lot of people begin to be cost burdened, meaning that they have to spend more than 30% of their monthly income on rent. And unfortunately, some people spend more than 50% of their monthly income on rent. What's affordable is when you don't have to spend more than 30% of your income on rent, because the other 70% is able to be used for childcare, for medicine, for food, for the various things, utilities. Georgia has the highest utility burden in the nation. So we have to solve that issue as well. But so when we talk about what is affordable, it's 30% of the income of the individual, which across the board for the city of Atlanta, when you see $19 an hour is what's necessary to afford a 2-bedroom apartment on average in Atlanta. And so that's what we should set it as affordable, is at that range, which is around $38,000 to $40,000 is where the AMI, the average median income, should be set. And so when we talk about these things, it's going to take leadership. It's going to take someone that's been trusted by the affordable housing community with policies that similar to the ones that I've already produced. I'm with the Atlanta magazine calling me the affordable housing champ. These are the things that I will bring to bear, is making sure that we do more affordable housing. My plan is to build 20,000 or build or preserve 20,000 units of affordable housing in 8 years, and also make sure that legacy residents and senior citizens won't be taxed out of their homes, where we will freeze seniors' taxes so that they don't have these tax increases that come because somebody next to you has built a $600,000, $700,000 home. The state of Georgia has some policies that try to block us from these things that help people, but we're going to make sure that we get through those blockades when I'm mayor, to be able to make sure that we do what's right for our legacy residents and senior citizens in Atlanta.
Council President Moore, how do you define affordable housing in the city of Atlanta? And how will you prevent property owners, landlords, if elected, from raising rent on people every year so that they're priced out of their homes?
So how do I define affordable housing? I define it as housing affordability. You know, how much housing can you afford? And so when we talk about it as if it's just one lump sum, but it goes from people who are unsheltered, who can't afford housing at all, to our city workers that say to me, you know, I'm on call and I have to travel 30, 40 miles to get into the city when I'm on call because I can't afford housing in the city. Or someone who is a middle income family who just wants to buy their first home in the city when they're finding the prices are $400,000 or $500,000. So what we can do is to make sure that we utilize what we have in the city to build the housing that we know people can afford. And that's using our vacant city-owned property. That's making sure that the Atlanta Housing Authority does its job to help those that are on the lower income strata so that they can find housing in the city. It also means for us to use property in our land bank authority. If we control the land, then we can control the costs and the price points, and we can make it available to people. As it relates to rent and rent costs, we are going to have to heavily incentivize those, particularly those that are building new multi-unit properties, so that they can and will provide affordability. I know we have inclusionary zoning, but there needs to be some incentive base to it to make sure that they can do that, because we, by state law, do not have the ability to do rent control. And since we can't control the rent, if we can't build it ourselves where we can control it, then we have to incentivize the market to be able to build those units so that people can afford it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. I want to stay on this housing issue for a few more minutes, and these are questions for which each of you have 2 minutes to answer. Now let's talk about eviction. Georgia has a swift eviction process. A renter can get bounced as quickly as missing one rental payment. The City of Atlanta has one of the worst eviction rates in the city. If elected, how do you plan to help Atlanta residents stay in their homes after these eviction moratoriums have been completely exhausted or have expired? Ms. Moore.
Well, the city has done some things, and I believe we can do more. And I believe we have to take the bureaucratic red tape out of it. We do have funds that we have in CARES Act funding. We have partners that are using to distribute this money. But where we can, if it's not a federal regulation, we need to take it out of there because people aren't being able to use it, and it's taking them very long to do it. So when we get those additional federal funds, we can make sure that happens. We can make sure the regulations are strengthened. I forgot the other part of your question.
What happens after the moratoriums expire?
Right, and so the other part is making sure that people have legal assistance. I know we have opened up our solicitor's office so that they can help people. And if we are doing our job, and I want us to do our job, and I talked about how we can build our own affordable properties, then we can have somewhere if someone needs to be rapidly rehoused because they are being evicted. That's how we want to make sure that we stop people from having to be able to live on the street. And so we've got to find in that affordable housing spectrum that we talked about yesterday, from the unsheltered all the way up to middle income people who can't afford to buy a house, their first time house. We also need to include people who are being evicted so that we have places where they can go until they can get on their feet and we can get them into some stable housing. So those are some things that I think the city can do, and it's easy lifting. And if I would like to also partner with other nonprofits to see if we can help people with their credit worthiness and other things so that they won't be evicted. You know, are there ways that we can get some stopgap funding as well as some counseling to help them to be able to stay in their home? Because once they're evicted, it makes it very difficult for them to find another place.
Councilmember Dickens.
Yeah, it's important for me to note that I've been a renter, I've been a landlord, and I have a mortgage right now in the home I own. And so this experience that you're talking about as it relates to evictions and making sure that people are able to stay in the homes that they're in, whether they're renting or owning, is important. And it's also important as a landlord to make sure that you're able to not lose your property as you're trying to make sure you go about this moratorium. So this is a delicate issue, and it's careful, and you have to go about it in a sensitive way. So I respect the moratorium, and I think it's necessary. And as we go forward, when the moratorium is lifted, what do we do next? And how do we make sure that we ensure that people that are experiencing the challenges of not being able to afford their rent, how are they able to stay in place? I believe that we need to have an office that's related to anti-displacement. This is a place where there's a place where you can just call in the city. We do have a lot of volunteer lawyer organizations, Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, but there's definitely a place, a central place that people expect is their government, is the place that you could call to have this conversation. I'm facing a troubling situation. I'm unable to afford my rent. And that place is the government, and then you can get that situation quarterbacked by someone in an office. It's also important to note that New York City was able to get dispatch 100% of their CARES money. 100% of their eviction prevention money, they were able to get out of their hands. The state of Georgia, we're still under 30%. This is about leadership, it's about government, it is about the effective way to lead and run a business enterprise. And you need to have a leader that understands that money that's coming from the federal government has to go to the benefit of the citizens of this region, of this city, and that is important to note, that you need a leader that knows how to manage these type of situations, and especially in a crisis like the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickens. So many Atlanta residents are concerned and worried about changes to Atlanta's comprehensive development plan, such that it would impact single-family zoning regulations. This is the question. What is your plan to keep the so-called feeding frenzy at bay, not only for popular neighborhoods like the West End, East Atlanta, and Morningside, but also neighborhoods in our city already undergoing gentrification or other redevelopment efforts where land values right now are super high? Councilmember Dickens.
Yeah, so your question is about how to do development without displacement. how to make sure that people that have contributed to this city for 30, 40, or for 20 years, that they can be able to stay in the homes that they love. To make sure that they do have amenities. People in the West End, people in Collier Heights, we actually share the same neighborhood. Collier Heights, we want a grocery store. We want some benefits. Amenities need to come to these areas, but we want to make sure those come without displacing us, that somebody else gets those benefits after we've lived there and sowed seeds of growth opportunities. So it's about the anti-displacement that I talked about earlier, but it's also, I've given out these cards to seniors that says, no soliciting, this house is not for sale. And on the backside, it tells you how to preserve your home and how to call out a trespasser, a predatory investor that's calling your home and these things. It's so that, you don't sell your house for $100,000 and you got nowhere else to go next month. You can't buy another house for $100,000. It's important to make sure that office that I'm talking about is able to really focus on legacy residents and seniors, to triage the situations that's coming their way to help them find support. And it's also about making sure that we have community benefits agreements related to large-scale projects that may come into our area, to say we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to get those jobs, to be able to train for those jobs, but also that if you're going to build something in our community, we have the opportunity to be a contractor, to also, that you're going to help our parks, help our whatever it is that we need. There's a conversation that has to happen between the community and the enterprises that are coming into our community. And so when it relates to these areas, that's something that I'm very forward about and something that I've actually done, whether it's in Grove Park or other communities, where I say it's okay that you build these buildings in our communities, but I want to know how many of us will be allowed in those buildings.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Dickens. Council President Moore, the question is about managing development and preventing gentrification in the city.
I thought you said something about CDP.
So many Atlanta residents are concerned about the proposed changes to the city's comprehensive development plan that would impact those single-family zoning regulations. What will be your policy to protect popular neighborhoods like West End, East Atlanta, Morningside, as well as those neighborhoods that are already undergoing gentrification or other redevelopment areas where the land values right now are super duper high?
Thank you. So on the first part about the changing of single-family zoning, there is a proposal that is still working its way through council, and I have been opposed to that. One thing that Atlanta cherishes is its many neighborhoods and their diversity and character and their vibrancy. And so I do not support a blanket rezoning of all single-family property, because it will lead to the next part of the question, which I believe is the gentrification of our neighborhoods and the changing dynamics in our neighborhoods. One, the changes in the CDP would allow by right people to be able to build accessory dwellings on their property. That's not the problem, but we do have to plan for this. We have to be very intentional about increasing the density and how we increase the density in our city, and making sure we're taking into account all aspects that deal with it. Our infrastructure, our water, our sewer, our roads, our parking, all of those things need to be taken into account, because when you do that, you could increase the speculation on property, which goes to, there are some neighborhoods in our city that are still primarily affordable. And what I want to do is make sure that we're instituting our neighborhood standards program, making sure we identify those neighborhoods that have some things that are making it deteriorate, make sure we stabilize those neighborhoods so that we can increase the life cycle of that neighborhood and keep it as affordable as long as we can. I would also like to look at the biggest issue. One of the big issues is taxes, to see if we can do something for legacy residents to either freeze the assessed value, which means we would have to get other taxing jurisdictions like the school board and county to work with us, or if we can't do that, if we can extend the exemption that the city has on those property owners.
Thank you very much, Council President Moore. This next question, and again, this is a question that each of you has 2 minutes to answer, deals with jobs and education. The Atlanta region is a leader in jobs growth, but many good jobs are going unfilled. More than half of jobs in our city require at least a 4-year bachelor's degree, while only 35% of residents age 25 or older meet that requirement. If elected, what is your plan to close the large gap between education and jobs, especially when Atlanta has only 2 community colleges in our area? And Ms. Moore, we'll begin with you.
So that is a very great question, and that it stems in so many ways. It even deals with the issue that we've dealt with crime. People need to have education to be able to see their way out of generational poverty and making sure that they're being able to be productive members of the society. As president of council, I had a program called More Girls in STEM. And it was to do exactly that, and as mayor, I would like to expand that and do it in other areas as well. And that is being very intentional and targeting challenged neighborhoods where low-income neighborhoods, and I specifically did it for girls in middle school because I know that's the age when they have that insecurity and they're trying to find their way in the world, and exposing them to science, technology, engineering, and math. And we had some great and phenomenal successes out of that program. And I believe when we touch our children with those opportunities, then it gets their interest up. And you could probably think back to some little touch points you had when you were kids that made you be to do what you're doing. And so we want to make sure that as we can at the city to get those programs, as well as having a 4-year degree, really being able to work with our unions to bring people, and particularly youth, and get them excited into trades. All kids don't want to go to college, and where we can intersect with that. That's why I want us to use our recreation centers as the focal point to do more than just play basketball or swim, but also give them this exposure to other opportunities that they may be able to get excited about and do something different with. So I think there are many ways we can do that, and I want to add also working with early childhood education, making sure that we work with kids pre-5 years old so that we can strengthen them so when they get in school, they'll be on a better track.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Again, Councilmember Dickens, the question is, if elected, what is your plan to close the large gap between education and jobs, especially when Atlanta only has 2 community colleges here?
Yeah, I actually believe that this is the anchor question for all the other questions. As we talk about affordable housing, we talk a lot about building housing, but the affordability comes with income. And if people's incomes aren't moving up, we will all be at risk of needing affordable housing, right? So when we talk about crime, root causes of crime often has to do with people having hopelessness and despair, not seeing a pathway forward. This is why when I talk to CEOs and CTOs, Chief Technology Officers and Chief Information Officers over the past 5 or 6 years, I said, I see that you import a lot of your talent into our city. You bring a lot of people here from the West Coast or from New York or from Chicago to fill these jobs, but I know about a whole lot of untapped talent in our city. And because these jobs don't always require a college degree anymore, it's time for us to start training people on certifications in technology. And so when I saw a problem, I just didn't see a problem and say that's an issue. Somebody needs to do something about it. I created the technology career program at TechBridge that now has trained hundreds of people, up to 500 people in the last 3 years, to get $60,000, $70,000 jobs in just 4 months. Certifications by working with the CIOs and CTOs saying, you don't really need this job description to say you need 3 to 5 years experience or you need a college degree to do Salesforce or JavaScript. It's time for us to get this untapped talent in our city back to work. And so now in this room, I see 3 or 4 employers that employ my people and 3 or 4 organizations that we work with to take people from poverty to prosperity. And when I'm mayor, we will do that times 1,000. I will be the jobs mayor for the city of Atlanta, and we're going to create the Atlanta Department of Labor that's going to allow us to work with unions to get apprenticeships and get the training that we need, work with Atlanta Technical College, as you mentioned, to train people in logistics and transportation, but technology is the key. We're talking about the future, and that's what I'll provide.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Dickens. I'll stay with you for this next question. Researchers tend to find that most students need to read proficiently by the time you're in the third grade or at the end of the third grade, if you're going to be successful. In Atlanta, only 40% of our third graders are hitting that mark. If elected as mayor, how will you work with the Atlanta Public Schools to assure the next generation of Atlanta residents are prepared to succeed?
Yeah, those are daunting and horrible statistics that we have to change. And what I'm going to do is do more of what I'm doing now as a city council member. One thing to discuss is that we need to have a chief education officer in the city of Atlanta. A chief education officer working directly for the mayor, cabinet level position that will be able to be a liaison between our school system and the city. After school programs are all happening after the kids get out of school. Summer jobs program, weekend opportunities. These things need to be coordinated with the chief education officer that has a full staff that keeps track of all of the programs so that we have predictable pathways for kids to be able to be successful, to go to college, to go to careers. This is about trying to make sure that we use data to our advantage to say kids that are in STEM programs, how often do they end up going into a STEM field? Being able to say those kids that are in drama and dance and those things, how many times are they going to college for fine arts and those things? Being able to have predictable pathways that we don't just leave it up to chance that our kids are gonna be able to get there. We're gonna use it, you're gonna utilize our skills in all of the business community as well as the nonprofits to our benefit for our kids. And also with early childhood education, this chief education officer isn't gonna just start at kindergarten. This person is gonna go from cradle all the way to college and career, because it's important, early childhood education, because we need to make sure that they're able to hear these words and to be able to have comprehension prior to getting to kindergarten. It starts at home, but we don't have to leave it there. Last thing I'll say is I will make sure that we get rid of the digital divide in the city of Atlanta. People should have connectivity and devices, because most of these kids, I don't know if you know this, you guys have kids, they learn what a tablet is and an iPhone early. And so if other kids with resources have advantages because their kid is reading on a tablet at second and third, at age 2 and 3, then everybody needs to have that. No more digital divide in Atlanta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ms. Moore, again, we're talking about the very sad statistic that our third graders are not performing where they need to be. And the question is, if elected, how will you as mayor work with the Atlanta Public Schools to assure that our next generation of adults is prepared to succeed?
So, where a child starts has a lot to determine on where they end. And so that's why it is important that we even reach children before they get to school. So we're talking about from 5 years to infancy, and making sure that we support early childhood education, because it's going to be important so they don't start behind. Once they get in school, I would love to see one of many ideas that I have, that we partner with our public schools, particularly in our more challenged communities. For instance, when a kid gets out of school, take them directly by the buses the APS has to a recreation center. Have people there working with our nonprofit partners. Let's help them with their homework. Feed them a meal. Let them do recreation, or expose them to STEM or some trade opportunities, whatever it is that they want to do. And that's the other thing. We need to find out what interests kids. Many of them like technology. They like esports. They like robotics. Get them interested in something. And then after they're finished, later in the evening, get those same school buses to come pick them up and take them home. Why is that important? It's important because we got to keep our eyes and arms around our kids. If we don't, we find them drifting off doing other things, and we can also help them there to enhance what they've learned already in school. So I think that we can work with the school system by being a backup and a reinforcement, but also integrate other activities that keep people engaged and involved and out of gangs and out of trouble, and hopefully let them move up to being more productive adults in our society.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. I will stay with you for this next question. Okay. House Bill 286 restricts cities and counties when it comes to funding law enforcement. It sort of limits it at 5%. What will be your plan or your policy to support the needs for auxiliary services that focus more on mental health and homelessness if those dollars are not available for police and funding?
So, we already have a pre-arrest diversion center, and I know the diversion program, that needs to be enhanced, but what I really would love for us to do, and I will be investigating it very soon and getting it implemented, hopefully right after the first 100 days, if not sooner, depending on procurement time frame, is to do like they've done in Eugene, Oregon. They've been doing it for 30 years. It's extremely successful, where you have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crew of people who are trained mental health professionals. So when you have behavioral and mental health issues, that you have them respond. Not someone with a badge and a gun that can probably agitate and heighten that situation, and we've seen where that's gone bad. Well, you have trained professionals who can help administer mental health services and calm a situation down. Of course, they can always use the police as backup, but that is one thing that we certainly need to enhance, and that's not going to take away from our police funding. It can be in addition to what we're already funding for our officers. And so that is one of many things that I think we need to look at. We need to look at alternative ways to interact with our citizens and making sure that everything is not a response with a badge and a gun. And frankly, when I talk to officers, and I have many of them that I talk to, they don't necessarily want to be the ones to respond to this. They're not trained for that, and that is not their job. And we have plenty unsheltered on our street, plenty people with mental health services. As mayor, what I'm going to be doing is being at the state legislature and at the federal government, seeking more funding for mental health services, because while we may respond to it, how are we going to treat them, and how are we going to house those that need to be treated?
Thank you very much. Do you need for me to repeat the question?
No, actually, I think the response is actually similar. This is what we're doing already with pre-arrest diversion and policing alternatives. I can assure you that most of the officers that I've talked to, they don't want to be the ones to deal with people experiencing mental health challenges or those that are experiencing homelessness. They would much rather leave that up to a specialist. And that's why we must get to 24 hours for our pre-arrest diversion program. Right now, it's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so that leaves the weekends wide open, and it also leaves the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. wide open also. So we have to invest more in that, and I think that we already have that in our budget. Right now, the City Council, we have the budget approved for 2,039 officers, and right now we're somewhere around 1,500 to 1,600 officers in the city, based on whoever, the most recent count. And so we're operating right now with a lot more money to be able to do these type of programs. So we have to put them in place as soon as possible. And when I'm mayor, I will make sure that we get our pathway to going 24 hours, 7 days a week for our pre-arrest diversion program. And if you've ever ridden MARTA, which I hope you do, it's a great way to get around the city and to actually save the environment and get out of traffic, you'll notice that there's a MARTA police officer, but there's also a trained specialist. The MARTA police officer has a badge and a gun and a taser, but the specialist does not. They don't have any lethal force. They help with those people that are experiencing homelessness, mental health challenges, loud kids on the train like I used to be. So all that is important to know, that we have a model that's operating quite well in the city, and it's just in the form of our rapid transit system, and so we can duplicate that on the streets of Atlanta, similar to our ambassador force and other entities that are non-lethal ways to respond to non-emergencies, so that our officers can stay ready for emergencies. That's what they really want, and they don't want to be involved in the other stuff.
Thank you both very much. Everyone, that concludes our first segment, our series of questions that each candidate had 2 minutes to answer. For this next series of questions, we will give you each 1 minute to answer the question. Again, because this is the League of Women Voters and community partners, including the ACLU and the Urban League of Greater Atlanta and other organizations who have brought us here tonight. It is a forum, and each of you has an opportunity to answer these questions. And in this series of questions, Ms. Moore, I will begin with you. Shirley Franklin was known as the potholes mayor. Despite the T-Splost in 2016 and those dollars, The city still has major issues with potholes and metal plates everywhere. What can be done, or better yet, if elected, what will you do to fix the pothole problem? 1 minute to solve that problem.
I wish it could be solved in 1 minute because those potholes make you take many minutes to get your cars fixed from hitting them, and they can make you cuss. I will say that, first of all, we've got to understand that we've got to have a big service delivery issue in our city. And the departments are really in disarray and dysfunction and mismanagement, understaffing, equipment down, facilities bad. So as mayor, the first thing that I'm going to do is do a quick assessment, because we need to get moving, of our departments and making sure that they have the things that they need to order to fill those potholes. You can't fill them without tar and the equipment to put them down. And so we will be looking at that, and also making sure that we have a matrix where we can respond immediately to the potholes as they're done. But look at this infrastructure money we're getting and see how we can prioritize it, actually paving the roads instead of just filling a pothole.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, in the last 4 years, the city of Atlanta has filled 28,000 potholes in 4 years. That's a Herculean task, but you have to ask yourself, why were there 28,000 potholes, right? The challenges are infrastructure. To have 28,000 potholes mean you're just, whack-a-mole, chasing where the water goes after you fill one pothole. It's about the overall infrastructure. We have to invest in that. And by Shirley Franklin endorsing me, she's going to help me be able to think through this pothole posse and how to get that back up and going. But seeing that problem over and over again of us chasing potholes, that's why I created the Atlanta Department of Transportation 18 months ago. And now we're streamlined and we're focused and we're also coordinated. So now we can pave roads like Cascade Road, which is going to get paved starting next month. And then DeKalb Avenue. And then we pave 10th Street and some other streets. And when I say pave them, we resurface them. Take it down to the middle of the street and then come back up. We got to do that across the city.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickens. An expanded regional transportation network is critical to keeping Metro Atlanta economically competitive. If elected, how would you as mayor improve mobility and transportation in the city?
Yeah, first about MARTA and our mobility, we have to deal with the city of Atlanta first. I mean, this is where we have current riders that still want to have an even better current experience. As we're trying to convince Cobb and as we're trying to convince Gwinnett that we need them to get off of our highways and get on a train and off of our roads as much as possible, but they have to make that commitment to themselves to be able to tax themselves by 1 penny. But if they don't do that, the current rider here in Atlanta wants a better experience by making sure that our stations are improved and they're nicer and cleaner, but also using technology to be able to have more consistency on when the train arrives and dependability. That's what makes people not want to ride it, is the infrequent dependability that occurs. Being able to improve that is what we're going to be able to do. And when we make sure that MARTA is awesome in the city, Gwinnett, Cobb, and others will end up saying, let me get on board this train.
Ms. Moore?
So building major infrastructure plans like transit starts with relationship building. And it starts with also being a part of the table. I'm a member of the Atlanta Regional Commission, and so that's where many of these decisions are made into how we invest in transit and how we invest regionally, and having those relationships with the other partners that we want to include, and having those dialogues, being active and involved with organizations like the Georgia Municipal Association, where you're able to talk and touch and be with other leaders to get them on board and on track. We need to begin to look at how we can move up some of these projects. We have major money that may be coming from the federal government. We need to make sure that we're prioritizing it, looking at our belt line. We have nice paths, but we would love to connect north, south, east, and west in our city. And then there's other projects that we would like to see go outside of the city to connect people so we don't have to be using all of the buses. So it's about relationships.
Thank you very much. Hold on to that mic, Ms. Moore. You get this next question. Atlanta is home to the civil rights movement, but remains dotted with memorials to the Confederacy, ranging from street names to statues. And even as we are seeing many name changes in the Atlanta school system, for example, Grady High School has been renamed Midtown High School. What is your position about these memorials? Should they be kept, removed, or modified?
Well, I do know that we have some limitations on what we can do by state law, but I do believe where we can remove them, we can remove them. Where we can commission these things to be put in museums where they may need to be history or artifacts, so we can do that. What happened at the city is we started with a commission, and I believe that needs to be revitalized, and we need to move on some of those plans. We were able to change some names of a street recently. The council removed a monument that wasn't even really a Confederate piece. It was sort of the opposite of that. So we need to have that discussion, and we need to start to see what we can do, even in contextualizing some of the pieces that we may not be able to move. But the city streets are a certain low-hanging fruit. I believe that we can certainly walk on. As I said earlier, I was talking about from Buckhead to Bankhead. Bankhead Highway wasn't necessarily Confederate, but they were able to change that name because they didn't like the politics of the name that was there. So it can be done.
And so you're saying you would support
Yes.
having those conversations?
Excuse me?
You would support having those conversations if
Almost
elected mayor?
definitely, and having that commission active and involved so we can start moving on it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dickens?
Remove them. And the reason why you do that is you have to set a precedent that, if you lose a war, you don't get to be celebrated. And
No applause, no applause. This is a forum.
they can celebrate it, but, however they want to. But in the city of Atlanta, we belong to the United States of America, and the Union won this war. So why are we constantly having this, Confederate monuments, et cetera? Other states are doing it, and we did do a good thing by changing Confederate to United and a few others. But there is a commission that I voted for on the city council to be able to make sure that we go through as many Confederate statues, monuments, and memorials and get rid of them. Now it's just going to take some intentionality by leadership, so the mayor's office has to be very focused on it, and that's what I'll do when I'm mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dickens. Many mayors of our city have struggled with the issue of reducing the incidence of homelessness. The pandemic has not helped this situation. What is your plan or policy to fight homelessness in our city?
Yeah, currently we have about 3,200 individuals that are unsheltered. They either sleep in their cars or outside of a store, or they sleep in a tent somewhere. And we do have some that sleep in shelters. We still only have 70% occupancy in our shelters. So we still have room for 30% more people, but individuals are choosing not to go to shelters, whether that's for COVID reasons or comfort reasons. Whatever it is, we see that the trend is we have to provide a better alternative for our individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And I believe in a housing first model, meaning that we buy up some motels and hotels that are in the city or just outside the city and allow those to be used for 30 to 60 day triage opportunities where we can start on the path of drug rehabilitation, or start on the path of helping them with their mental health issues, or those that are veterans, getting them where they need to go, or those that are experiencing domestic abuse that they are trying to flee from. We can triage the situation by quickly getting them to housing, but we can't do that on the streets as easily. We have to get people in a home quickly, and then we get them to sustainability by helping them get a job at Goodwill, First Step Staffing, Georgia Works, or some other places.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was reading ahead. Ms. Moore, I won't pay attention as you answer this question as well at about 1:15. And it was, many mayors have struggled with reducing homelessness in the city. The pandemic has not helped this situation. If elected, what is your plan or policy to combat homelessness in Atlanta?
So it is a serious issue, and it can get worse. Google, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, homeless, and the pictures are horrific. We have not seen that level here in the city of Atlanta, but if we're not careful, we can. Last night I had an opportunity to talk to a gentleman who was on the street unsheltered, and he always brought me back to one piece of this conversation, and that is mental health services. Many of them have drug, alcohol, substance abuse, and mental health issues. If we do not have places where they can go, where they can get really get the help that they need, they're going to continue to be on the streets. And then also, everybody wants somebody to do something with them, as you say. But when I've gone out to forums and this issue's come up and I ask people to raise their hand if they're okay with a small facility in their neighborhood, I get no takers.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you for the next question. It's an infrastructure question, Ms. Moore. Poor infrastructure continues to be a major problem in Atlanta, although some council districts fare better than others. Our current mayor has just proposed a $700 million funding package to address infrastructure needs over a 5-year period. That would include your term if elected. What is on your priority funding list when it comes to infrastructure?
So certainly looking forward to federal funds. And the first priority, I believe, are some of the promises made and promises not kept from future or previous bond issues like Renew Atlanta, even going back to the quality of life bond issue. In the city of Atlanta, and particularly in the district I represented, District 9, there are many streets that are unpaved. People have been living on gravel roads since the beginning of the city's time. We need to fix those things. So that needs to be in the first tranche. The second needs to be very intentional about where we're going to bring increasing density, where there's growth, and where there's severe road conditions that are going to need major investment. We will never get all of the money that we need to fund infrastructure, but we've got to be very smart about where we prioritize it, and then we got to make sure we're smart about spending the money, making sure there's clear oversight, making sure we're not having people padding the contracts for any other reason, but to make sure that we get it done.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Mayor Bottoms has just proposed a $700 million funding package to address infrastructure needs over the next 5 years, which would include your term should you be elected mayor. What items are on your priority funding list?
Yeah, there's above ground and then there's below ground infrastructure. Of course, I want to make sure that we build light rail around the Beltline to connect all these communities together, and also down to Campbellton Road. Believe it or not, Greenbrier, if you're coming into the city, you got a 40-minute bus ride to get to a MARTA station. So those individuals need to have rapid transit. So that's above ground, but also to make sure that we have within 1 mile around every transit station and then within blocks of every school and senior center, we need to make sure we put in sidewalks so that people will be able to wheelchairs and walk, and that's part of infrastructure above ground. But then below ground is our sewer system. As many of you have experienced during a flash flood, Atlanta has a lot of hills, and so we still have a sewer issue that leads to some of our crumbling roads because the roads end up absorbing too much of that water. So we need a better sewer fix in some of these areas. And then, the other thing that I would say is all of us during this pandemic experienced that parks are a part of infrastructure to me, because we need to have nature and opportunities in our lives. So I would use that as infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Madam Timer, if you would help me, I have 2 questions that I want to hold until we move to closing statements. So if you'll flag me to make sure that I have time for that. I'd like to now begin to ask some of the questions that were submitted by members of the community. And the first question, Ms. Moore, what Atlanta issue keeps you awake at night? And if elected, what policy would you work to enact in order to make sure that not only you, but the rest of the citizens got a good night's sleep?
Well, I think it's getting a good night's sleep and sleeping knowing that the bullets are not going to be flying through your window while you're sleeping. It means that you know that you can drive somewhere and stop at a light and not be pulled out and beaten to a pulp and waiting for a long time for someone to come. It means not calling 911 for help, and someone actually is able to answer the phone, and our officers are able to actually get to you because the cars that they have actually work and are running, or the fire happens, and the trucks actually can get to where you are and reach you. So those are the things that keep me up at night, and that is one of the reasons I'm running for mayor, is we have a broken city. And we have not paid attention to the foundation, the fundamental services in this city and how they're delivered, making sure we have the equipment. You all are what is in the care of this city, the people of this city, and we have to be able to serve you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, I actually think it's the steady drumbeat of inequity that I keep feeling. That keeps me up at night. I feel like I'm chasing and trying to help the city chase to catch up so that all of us can be able to still live here. It does keep me up at night because that leads to a lot of things like homelessness and crime and, despair. That beat, I hear it, I feel it, like it's trying to catch up each day, trying to help people get to fairness, even, and then beyond, opportunity. And so that keeps me up. So that's where I spend a lot of my time, trying to uplift people and help them beat the odds, because the odds are now beginning to be stacked against too many people in our city. And so this tale of two cities is ending up going to be one city, and it's going to be San Francisco, whereas all prosperity and all the poor folks have to drive in every day to serve the rich, and then they go back home at night. And so that's a steady drumbeat that I'm a little unnerved by, and it leads to other things like crime and stuff.
Thank you very much. Next question goes here to Ms. Moore, and then back to you, Mr. Dinkins. If elected, what are your top 2 or 3 priorities for a Moore administration in the first 100 days?
So the major threat to our city right now is making sure that we can make sure that every neighborhood in this city is safe, no matter what the income bracket or zip code. That's the number 1 threat to our brand right now. The second is our city service delivery that I talked about, making sure that you're getting the city services that you pay for, that we get these departments fixed, that we get the equipment, that we get the right management, that we get what we need to be able to serve you. And then finally, transparency, making sure you know what's going on in city government, making sure that you have ethical city government that you can trust so that we can build that public trust, because we have some very difficult decisions that we have to make. And the last thing you need to do is to trust your leadership. You may not agree with the direction, but you trust that they're doing the best for the city. And making sure that we're accountable to you, the people that we serve, and that we do what we say we're gonna do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, the first 100 days are going to be critical. First, we have to hire a bunch of people, a cabinet that is coming from the private sector or the public sector that you can trust, that they know what they're doing, and that they're filled with the desire and passion to serve the city of Atlanta. So you got to hire a competent cabinet. The second thing that we're going to do is make sure that we put the police chief on a 100-day contract. And there's 4 metrics in that contract for me, which is violent crime going down, the recruitment and hiring of new officers, the retention and attrition of the existing officers, and then 4th would be to make sure that the community-based policing opportunities are going forward as planned. That would be to keep our public safety movement on track so that we can reduce this crime wave. The third thing that we're going to do is bring in a consultant to be able to do an assessment of every customer-facing department that we have in the city of Atlanta. That means our Department of Public Works, our Department of Transportation. We're going to make sure that we're looking at 311 calls to see if our service level agreement are being matched by our service delivery, and if not, we will fix that first.
Thank you very much. I'll stay with you, Mr. Dinkins. I want to talk about crime. Yeah. Please offer the viewers in this audience concrete solutions for dealing with the crime problem we currently experience in our city. And if this is something that you've pitched before, why did it not move forward?
Yeah, my plan is the Safe Streets plan. It's a plan that has been vetted by former police chiefs across the nation. I was the first candidate to publish my plan. And it's a balanced approach to crime, which is to be able to look at safety and justice to make sure that we're smart on crime. And this means that we're 450 to 500 officers short, so we do have to hire 250 officers in the first year to be able to replace those officers that we've missed. But we have to train all officers in the 21st century policing way to be racially sensitive, to de-escalate crime issues, but we also want to make sure that our officers are getting out of their cars to walk the beat, to get to know the citizens and to the restaurants and bars, to be able to go out and be visible. This is what I did when I was the public safety chairman in 2017, when we hit the lowest crime of 40 years. And we did that because we did what I call walk-and talks in each zone, where police officers and the community spend 2 hours walking every quarter, pointing out things that we need to repair. So my public safety plan is one that's a balanced approach, but it involves the community and youth engagement.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore.
So my plan is a 5 C's plan. It's a more comprehensive plan that deals with first our children, and we talked about some of my ideas around children, mentoring programs, etc. The second is our cops. One, building their morale, letting them know that the leadership supports them, getting to every roll call, making sure that they know who their elected official is, getting more officers, getting good leadership. The second is our courts. The third, rather, is our courts. Dealing with our court system. Repeat and violent offenders are continuing to be let out. How can we work with them to do that? Opening up our city jail to allow a humane detention of people while they were waiting trial. The other is code enforcement in and around our bars and nightclubs and restaurants. I love nightlife, and those who give it want to make sure that people who also don't have license, or those who do, are doing the right thing, because they want to make sure that their patrons are safe in and around those establishments. And then finally, it's the community. It's all of you. You have to be a part of it too.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moore, and I will stay with you for this next question. The council recently adopted plans for a new law enforcement training facility. The location of that facility has been debated. Do you support the construction of that training facility where it is now, or would you suggest something else to protect the green space?
So I did speak out. As president, council only voted in the case of the tie, but I'm running for mayor and I want people to know where I stood. And after much deliberation and a lot of amendments, I supported the training facility where it is. It went from 150 some odd acres down to 85. Every tree removed, 100 is going to be replaced. Specimen trees are going to be placed there, and they're going to have a community group that is going to help make the decision on the final footprint. So that gave me comfort. But what I'm going to do as mayor is the rest of the acreage, which is quite considerable, I'm going to make sure it's very clear that it can only be used for either passive or active green space based on a discussion with the community, because we do need to preserve any forested or green space that we have, because we are in the midst of climate change, and we have to do our part as a city to make sure that we keep our lungs of our city open.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, I was one of the 10 council members to vote in favor of the public safety training facility in DeKalb County, and it's because it's also for firefighters and police officers, and it is a way for us to do community-based public safety. After the unfortunate killing of George Floyd and too many other unarmed individuals of our nation, we all cried out that we need police reform, we need training, we need to change the standard operating procedures. Well, just like everything that I see, I don't just talk about it, we want to go do something about it. So you don't just say training without changing the training. And we have to do that in a facility that's world-class, that's inviting to the public to be able to be a part of. And so we have made significant progress, got this thing down to 85 acres. By the way, my high school, Mays, sits on 72 acres, to give you an example of what this facility will feel like. It's an educational institution that will allow the community and the police and fire to work together to firefighters right now are learning how to drive in vacant parking lots around Atlanta versus an emergency vehicle obstacle course, which they will have.
Thank you, sir. I'll stay with you here. What is one issue in this campaign that is not receiving a great deal of attention? And if elected as mayor, what would you do, Mr. Dickens, to address that concern?
We've had 40 debates and forums. Y'all have asked everything. You know what? I think how do we make sure that Atlanta stays ahead of all of these other regional players that want to be us, want to take our spot in technology, want to take our spot in TV and film and music, and take our spot in just being cool and fun? So I think what we have to do is continue to lead from the front, to be ahead. And so how do you do that is you make sure that you draw circles and not lines. You bring a lot of people together with the thought leaders that are in this room. We need to lead in fashion. We wear a lot of fashion, but we don't produce enough in Atlanta. So we need to be forward in that. In construction, we talk about we need affordable housing, and we're gonna build affordable housing, but I see that as an industry export. Once we get great at it, people are gonna come to us about how to do it where they are. So I think being forward and being front and being leaders leaders like we are, like the civil rights movement. We were leaders there. I think now it's time for a new revolution.
Ms. Moore?
I would say preserving history. Atlanta is changing rapidly, and neighborhoods are changing rapidly, and people are moving into neighborhoods that they have no clue as the history of that neighborhood. And I believe that we haven't talked enough about how do we preserve some of our older buildings, how do we tell the story of the people who were in this particular neighborhood. I live in historic Collier Heights. It has a very rich history. It was built by African Americans, for African Americans, and the people who built the houses were African Americans. But if we wait till later down the road, it may be a whole different type of neighborhood, and people will really not know the rich history of that neighborhood. And there are many others like that around the city. There are many buildings in the city that we ought to be intentional about saving so that they can tell the story of Atlanta. So in the next 20 years, in the next 40 years, they're part of what we know to be today, to be Atlanta, will still be around and people can hold on to it. So I believe we don't talk about historical preservation enough.
Thank you very much. And I'll follow up here. I did. Sorry. It will be your turn for this question. As we continue to talk about neighborhoods, if elected Atlanta's 61st mayor, what is your strategy for making sure Buckhead remains a neighborhood in the city of Atlanta?
So as soon as I'm elected, I'm going to be reaching out to those who choose to make this movement to leave the city, because you got to build relationships. Doesn't mean you have to agree with each other, but you need to know who the players are, and you need to make your stance. Also, with the staff, we'll be coming up with very concrete reasons why it makes no sense, not only for the whole city of Atlanta, but it makes no sense for them to leave. I like to fight issues, particularly policy issues, with good arguments. And then I'm going to be at the state legislature. I'm going to be in the leadership's office, just like I did when they tried to take our airport. I'm going to be down there every day. If I have to lay out in front of the governor's office to keep him from signing something, I'll do that. But if they have a chance to have a vote, I believe by November 2022, they will see that they have great leadership in the mayor's office, that we are working very hard on the issues that concern everybody in this city, and a majority of them, just like Eagles Landing left Stockbridge, will vote to stay here.
Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, the proposed divorce between Atlanta and Buckhead is going to be an unnecessarily expensive one for both spouses. And the truth of the matter is the children are the ones that will suffer most, because the Atlanta public school system will lose $230 million. And so we have to make sure that we aggressively fight to make sure that Buckhead stays in the city of Atlanta, that we have one city with one future. And how we do that is we don't wait till January. We do that right now. There's a coalition of individuals that are fighting back. David Stockard and others are out there fighting a good fight. They're putting a campaign and a coalition together for the people that want to stay in Buckhead. Because, by the way, there's a lot of people that want to stay in the city of Atlanta that live in Buckhead. They don't want to start a new city. So first, it's starting now with individuals that are putting up the good fight. And then two, once I am mayor, we'll make sure that Buckhead is safe and that they're heard and that they get the service delivery that they want. But I'm going to make sure that's for Southwest Atlanta, Northwest Atlanta, Midtown. I've lived all over this city. Everybody wants to feel safe and wants to feel heard. And so when you get a mayor in place that they trust and that they see every day, they'll make sure they want to stay.
And there's the horn. We knew you all wanted to hear it. Council President Moore, how we know that our region prospers when the city and the state get along. How would you characterize your relationship with state lawmakers across the street at the Georgia Capitol?
Well, as an active, engaged, and involved member of the Georgia Municipal Association and being in leadership with that, we engage, and that's what we do on behalf of cities across the state, is engage with state legislators. But I also do that on my own. And I use as an example when there was a takeover attempt of the Atlanta airport. I was the one who was down there at every session. I was testifying, I was meeting with leadership, meeting with the sponsor of the bill, doing everything that I can. So it's about relationship building, and it's about reaching out Also, working with the Atlanta Regional Commission and other legislators from counties, et cetera, is also in a way that you can do that. So you got to build those relationships, and I have them, and that will be how I would approach it.
Mr. Dickens, how would you characterize your relationship with the folks across the street at the state capitol?
Yes, it's pretty good. Today at noon, a whole bunch of them stood behind me, endorsing me on the steps of City Hall. A bunch of state legislators, state reps, state senators, they said they trust me for the leadership of Atlanta to go forward because I build coalitions, because I go across the aisle and have conversations with individuals in the state to see how we can improve the region. And so that trust has been rooted in the last 8 years of me being a city council member, as an at-large council member serving the entire city, which means I touched a lot of those state representatives' districts for the state. And so as well as county officials are supporting me, and this is because you have to have these relationships because a lot of the issues that we face are regional issues or sometimes state issues, whether it was me creating the Atlanta Department of Transportation where I had to work with state folks like GDOT, or with me creating the inclusionary zoning policy around the Beltline where I had to dance around a state prohibition on rent control, talking to state leaders about that. These are ways that I've created major policies by working with the state.
Thank you very much. I'm getting the time cue that we are just about out of time. If I would, one more question, and then I'm going to go back to those last two questions, and then we'll go to closing statements, okay? And we should be able to do this in about 5 minutes. If Council President Moore, some folks may have seen a map that looked at the support for each of you in the general election earlier this month. Your support seems to be in one part of the city, perhaps north. Mr. Dickens, your support seems to be strongly to the south. The question for both of you is this: how do you bring unity to a city that we've heard the two Georgia theory, now it sounds as if there's a two Atlanta theory? Ms. Moore.
Well, thank you for asking that question. As I started out to tell you, I represented a district that was diverse. It actually went from Buckhead to Bankhead, and so I have developed over the years a lot of relationships with adjoining Buckhead neighborhoods that adjoin the area that I represent. But I've also made relationships with those that are in the southern part of the city. I think those maps are a bit skewed when you can lose winning that particular area by a vote or two, and then your color is different. So I think people need to look at it, make sure that when they're looking at the map, which I've seen some people putting out, that there are a lot of black people live in those areas. There are a lot of people of all areas, and we have to get away from trying to divide our city on artificial lines. We are all Atlantans, whether you're in Buckhead or whether you are in the southern part of the city, and we need a mayor that can represent and speak to and be supported by both areas of town.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dickens?
Yeah, the map didn't tell the whole story. It did tell a good story, though, that we have to pay attention to, that there's a dividing line, that we have to make sure that you have to have a mayor that's able to bridge these gaps and these dividing lines. I was a little blue in that map all over the city. It was, anyway, I was second in most of the districts. I'm the one that actually had a diverse set of voter pool. Mine was all over the city, and that's where the next map that you should see is, that somebody like me that I was first place in some places in the South, but I was second place all over the city, which means that now I'm gonna go grab first place for all of those votes because I already have relationships everywhere. Being a citywide council member and having business interests that have been all across the city, being supported and supportive of people across the city, it's important to note that that map tells one story, which is important for us to recognize. When you see that blue, that's me, that's in various different places. But then when you get to the next map, you'll see that I got second in a lot of those places. Thank
you very much, Mr. Dickens. I'm just going to ask a nod before I ask you this to see if we really want to put this out there, because nobody's won anything yet. But if you become the next mayor, Ms. Moore, what would your legacy be?
My legacy will be that I fixed a lot of things that are inadequate in our city, and I left a great foundation for the next mayor.
Mr. Dickens?
That Atlanta didn't lose its soul, that we stayed one city that works for everyone, and that's about equity.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to our closing statements. At the beginning of this forum, we went in alphabetical order. Mr. Dickens spoke first, Ms. Moore spoke second. So as we close this evening, we will do reverse alphabetical order. Ms. Moore, you would then get the first closing statement.
Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of you who are listening and attending. We know that our city is at a very critical point, and this is an extremely important election. We know that the first and foremost thing is we want to be safe. You want to be able to go to your gas station. You want to be able to walk down the street and feel safe. And we need to work on that because it is the single most important and very threatening thing to our brand. The other thing that we know is that we pay dearly for our city services, and our city, frankly, is broken. And we have to be honest about the state that our service delivery is in this city. And we also need to make sure that we're supporting the employees and the city workers who work so hard to provide those services in the city and need to be supported. And then finally, we need to make sure that we are transparent about what we do. You need to know more about your government, because the more you know, the more you will demand, or the more you will expect, or the more you can applaud the successes that we have in this city. And so we're going to make sure that in every way we can, that we're as transparent as we can be about what we're doing. Second, we need to make sure that we follow up on our ethics. We need to strengthen our city so that we never have to, again, have a cloud of corruption that is over City Hall. And we still need to work to make sure that we strengthen that. I'm so proud, if I do nothing else in city government, to have authored the first legislation that would make us, and we do have now an Inspector General to keep us in compliance, as well as independent procurement review officers to independently watch our contracts. We need to, and I will issue a death certificate upon entry as as mayor of our city to pay to play in city government. It will no longer exist. And I'm also going to issue a birth certificate to those of you who've knocked on the door of City Hall and haven't been able to get in with your ideas, with your talents, and your ability to do work. I want you to join our team, FeliciaMooreForMayor.com. Thank you.
And a closing statement now from you, Mr. Dickens.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Condace, for moderating. I know this is, a lot of us have had a tough last few days with our friend and your colleague, Jovita Moore. I know this has been tough for you, so I wanted to extend that to you, as all of us have dealt with that, and you've done a fantastic job. And thank you to all of you for what you guys do in this voter registration and voter push. We have to get people out to the polls. The turnout was horribly low, so I'm glad about this engagement. Each one should bring one to the polls next time. This election is not like any other election in recent times. This election is about the future and the soul of the city of Atlanta. Are we gonna move forward in peace, productivity, and prosperity, or are we gonna go backwards to displacement, destruction, and corruption? We have a tale of two cities. A lot of poverty is all over our city, where there's a whole lot of growth opportunities that we have to make sure that everyone has the ability to have access to those opportunities, that we can afford these homes that we live in and afford the apartments we live in. So we have to have affordable housing at the top of the list that we must provide in this city. We must provide great paying jobs. And that's why I have the Atlanta Department of Labor and the programs that I've already demonstrated at Tech Bridge to train people to go from poverty to prosperity in just 4 months. It's imperative that we go out here and make sure that, yes, we need to have a prosperous Atlanta and an equitable Atlanta, but we also must make sure we have a safe Atlanta. And it's my job when I'm mayor to make sure that this crime wave is not the new norm. I have my Safe Streets plan, which is SAFE is 4 buckets, and that is how we're gonna make sure that we keep this violent crime wave down. But we also must invest in our youth. I already have a wonderful relationship with Atlanta Public Schools, being a graduate of the school system and someone who already have policies that tie the city council to the Atlanta School Board. I will actually go further than that by making sure that we have a chief education officer that works directly with the school superintendent so that we have opportunities for our youth so that they can grow and thrive in this city. So what I say is I have the leadership that requires the head, the heart, and the hands to get things done. So I'm smart enough to listen, but I'm strong enough to lead, and I want to be the next mayor of the city of Atlanta. Follow me at andreforatlanta.com.
Everyone, if you would please thank the two candidates in the runoff for mayor of Atlanta. And now the CEO of the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, Nancy Flake Johnson.
Thank you, Condace. Thank you, City Council President Moore, Councilman Andre Dickens. Let's give them a round of applause. I think this was extremely informative. We really appreciate your candor, great questions, and people now, we've got work to do. So the good news is that this room is full. We have hundreds of people watching virtually. It is critically important that we are engaged in educating ourselves on where we want Atlanta to go from here. We do have a tale of two cities. Tons of our citizens are living in poverty. 30% of Black residents live in poverty in our city, and the pandemic made it worse. So we've got to have leadership that's going to not only support business and safety and crime, but support people, families, and small businesses. And I think we heard some of that across the board tonight. So before you leave, I want to remind you that on this Thursday, you also have another runoff election. The Atlanta City Council President runoff mayoral forum will be at the Switchyard, same time, Thursday, November 11th. It'll be a hybrid event just like this one with your same sponsors for tonight. So on behalf of the League of Women Voters, the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, the Gathering Spot, our hosts, the Atlanta Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Inc., the Eta Lambda Chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Sorority, Inc., Fraternity, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, y'all. Fraternity, Alpha. Fraternity, I'm sorry, I got my AKAs and my A5As mixed up there. All right, come on, y'all. Y'all, calm down. All right, everything is good. All right, but thank you all for sponsoring tonight and for partnering and collaborating. So go out there, be advocates for your family, for your friends, for your colleagues to get involved. Let's show people that in runoff elections, we do care, and we're gonna turn out the biggest turnout that Atlanta has seen in its history. So thank you again to you all. Thanks to each and every one of you. Be safe. Good night.